I'd like to welcome you to the June 25th, 2007 Planning Commission meeting. Please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Will the Secretary please call roll?
Commissioner Adam?
Here.
Commissioner Grumney? Here. Commissioner Lunn?
Here.
Commissioner Reynolds? Here. Chair Fisher?
Here. Move to item number 5, written comments, announcements, and continuances. Mr. Town.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A few items for the Commission. First of all, we have a request from staff to continue Case 6A, which is the Municipal Code Amendment 2007-70062 relating to parking standards for garden centers. We anticipate this coming back to the Commission at our next meeting on July 9th. Secondly, there is a supplemental packet with 3 items included, one minor correction just in terms of format for the condition number 12 relating to SUP 2007. That is the veterinary clinic. Secondly, we have a letter that communicates a mitigated negative declaration for the Los Robles Medical Office, and that MND has been distributed to you this evening. And then finally, we have a memo regarding a non-substantive change to the minutes with regard to the, let's see, SUP 2006-70400. And with that, that is all that I have at this time.
Okay, I need a motion to continue Case 6A. Commissioner Reynolds.
I move that we continue Municipal Code Amendment MCA 2007-70062 to July 9th, 2007.
Vote, please.
Motion passed 5-0.
Will the Secretary please call Case 6B? Let me back up once, Lolia. Okay. Back up to public comments. Members of the public are invited to address the Commission on issues that are within the Commission's purview and not on the agenda. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes. I don't have any public comment cards, so we will proceed to Case 6B.
Hearing advertised as required by law is hereby open to consider agenda item 6B regarding case SUP 2007-70157. Applicant Christopher Deem request to allow a veterinary clinic in an existing commercial building. Location 561 East Thousand Oaks Boulevard. Recommendation approved with conditions.
Mr. Chua.
Good evening, Chairman Fisher, members of the Commission. For your consideration tonight is an application requesting to allow a veterinary clinic on an existing commercial building. The applicant is requesting to allow the operation of a veterinary clinic in a commercial building in a C2 zone. In a C2 zone, a special use permit is required for such use. The proposed clinic would be the only tenant in this building. In front, this is the aerial photo for the site. The building itself, right there. As you can see, it's the standalone building, and it has 6 parking spaces. The building is about 1,469 square feet. The existing 6 parking spaces meet the code requirement for a veterinary clinic. There will be no overnight care of boarding or of animals, which is as required, which is in accordance with our municipal code. The hours of operation would be 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday, and 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. on Saturday, and it's closed on Sundays. The project qualifies under categorical exemption 1, which includes the use of an existing private structure involving negligible or no expansion of use beyond that previously existing. Staff recommends approval of SUP 2007-70157 based on the findings and conditions detailed in the staff report. Staff's ready to answer any questions that you may have.
Questions of staff? Commissioner Reynolds.
Good evening, Mr. Chu. I was just curious, in the parking lot, there is a handicap spot, but I don't believe it's painted on the driveway. There's a sign, but I didn't see it painted on the space, and I just wondered if it would be painted before occupancy occurs.
When the applicant applies for a building permit and final inspection, these issues would be taken care of.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions? Nope. Okay, we'll go ahead and open the public hearing, and we'll go to the applicant. I do not have a card for the applicant, Christopher Deem. Mr. Deem, are you here? Are you Mr. Deem?
I'm sorry. Right here. Yes. I'm a little bit hard hearing, so please speak up.
Okay, Mr. Deem, if you can state your name, city of residence for the record, and you'll have 15 minutes.
Yeah, my name's Christopher Deem. I'm a veterinarian. I live in Oak Park, California, at 495 Bernini Court. The plan is to open a small animal veterinarian practice there. We do not plan to board animals overnight. I had previously a veterinarian clinic that I sold in Chatsworth about 3 years ago. I do have a letter from the previous landlord. It's pretty much, if I can read it, how the business operated. It says, Dr. Christopher Deem leased a veterinarian store from us for a period of 8 years from December 95 to July 2003 at the Devonshire Center, located at 21032 Devonshire Street in Chatsworth, California. His business is one of 12 retail stores located within the center. There are also offices located above the retail stores. During this time, he built up a very good business with a substantial number of loyal clientele. He always had a good rapport, not only with his own customers, but also with his fellow store owners. We were very sorry to see him leave. He always kept it clean and amazingly quiet, considering he had active animals, a shop. I never had a complaint or either a noise, odors, or any mess regarding his operation. And then the rest goes that he always paid his rent. And this is from Rich Ritchie, who's the owner and manager of the Devonshire Center. You can contact these people if you have any questions. There goes 818-882-1371. And this is pretty much what I'll be doing there. No boarding of animals. We do routine veterinary preventive care, vaccinations, sell flea products, minor surgery, spays and neuters. If there's an animal that's ill and requires hospitalization, we refer them to the Pet Emergency Center that's located on Moore Park Road at Los Arboles. So the place is rather small. You wouldn't have space to board animals anyway.
Okay, questions of the applicant? Commissioner Lund.
Good evening, sir. Thank you for coming down. In regards to the overnight boarding of the animals, have those arrangements already been made with the animal hospital?
I'm sorry?
Have the arrangements been made by your business in case there's any animals that need to have overnight boarding? Have you made those arrangements with the hospital?
Yeah, what I normally do is I'll call one of the several 24-hour practices. There's Ventura Medical Surgical Group located in Ventura. There's one on Moore Park Road. I like the Ventura Medical Surgical Group because they have a staff full of professionals, board-certified surgeons, internists, and all that. I use them quite a bit. So there's really no problem for that.
Okay, also a second question for you. In regards to signage for your facility, you've not, for your business, you haven't indicated any kind of signage at this point.
Yeah, I was waiting kind of for this. There's always that fear that things don't go through, so I contacted one of the local sign people who's done several signs in the city of Thousand Oaks. There is an existing sign that has a Thousand Oaks stamp, but I'm sure that they don't grandfather signs in. It depends on the business. So he knows all the rules and regulations, and he'll be contacting the necessary person here to, as far as the sign. I'm just not going to put a big old sign, veterinary practice, grand opening, you know.
Great, thank you. I know we have rules and regulations, and that'll all be reviewed and approved by the city. Thank you for that.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Deem. When you get a chance, can you please fill out a white speaker card for us?
Okay.
City attorney will grab one for you, and we'll be back to you shortly.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll go to our public speakers, Pat Gallagher. Ms. Gallagher, if you can state your name, city of residence, and you have 5 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Pat Gallagher. We live at 567 Irving Drive in Thousand Oaks. The front of our house has an unobstructed view of the property in the back of the property in Mention. And it sounds great to me. I just wanted to come so that I could state my husband and my concerns. At present, we have an auto alarm company across from us, so we're always hearing whoop, whoop, whoop. We hear a lot of noise from that. There's a liquor store, there's a tire store, and we hear that nah all day long. There's a high-performance motorcycle repair and sales business, and 2 weeks ago they had an event in the street which was quite loud with blaring music. And then there's Lister Rents, and we hear a lot of the sounds from those businesses. We've always had this problem, the melding of the commercial corridor on Thousand Oaks Boulevard and then the residential district. So to coin the words of my husband, if we don't see him, hear him, or smell him, it's fine. We love dogs. We have a Rottweiler. I take her to the vets. I would not want to have animal feces piled out in the back. I'm just trying to think of everything that possibly could go wrong so that I can state it now so we don't come back later on. Barking dogs, cat fights, that kind of thing. So that's our only concern. And other than that, we wish to be great neighbors.
Great, thank you. Questions of the speaker? No, thank you very much for coming down.
Thank you.
Okay, we will go back to staff for follow-up.
With relate to the speaker's concern, would like to let her know that there's a condition requiring that all activities should be done inside the building, and they won't be operating after 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock at night, and there will be no boarding of animals, so there will be no disturbances to you at night, and that's all staff needs to say. Thank you.
Questions of staff? Okay, no questions of staff. We will go ahead and close we'll go to back to the applicant for rebuttal. Mr. Deem, do you have anything else you want to present? Okay, I just need to know if Mr. Deem wants. Okay, Okay, Mr. Deem, can you come up?
As a response to that, all our businesses inside, it's hard to find a home that doesn't have pets in the home, if not in the backyard constantly barking. That won't be the case at this facility. At any one given time, we may have 4 pets in, maybe for surgery or some other procedure. It's enclosed, whereas I hear pets at night where I live. They're constantly barking. That won't even be a case where I'm at. So and everything's inside.
Okay, questions of the applicant? Commissioner Adam.
Good evening, Mr. Deem. As Mr. Chu mentioned, condition number 10 refers to what you were talking about, the interior. It says that all activities associated with the use will be within the interior of the building, and the storage of materials and conduct of work activities shall not be permitted outside the building. That will be within your ability to live up to that condition.
I'm sorry, the store of materials?
The storage of materials and conduct of work activities shall not be permitted outside the building premises.
Oh, yes, that's true.
Okay.
That's the case, yeah.
All right, just wanted to hear you say that. I wanted your neighbor to hear you say that.
Store materials outside the premises. They'll all be stored within the confines of the veterinarian practice, yes.
Good. Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you, Mr. Dean. Okay, we'll close the public hearing, open to commission discussion. Commissioner Lynn.
Thank you, Chair Fisher. I think that this is a good use of the property. I think that the fact that it's handicapped accessible, it's on Thousand Oaks Boulevard, everything's going to be done inside. This would be a great use for that area and a great service provided for pet owners. So with that, I'm going to move to approve SUP 2007-70157 based on the attached findings and conditions in the staff report, including the supplemental.
Comments to the motion, Commissioner Reynolds.
And I'm going to support the motion. I was pleased to see that there is really not a back door. There's a door on the side. So I think that that'll help the neighbors too, that they, there isn't a back door, even though there's a vacant lot behind the building, but there is a door at the side, which is next to the market there then.
Other comments? Okay, vote please.
Motion passed 5-0.
And there's a 10-day appeal period. Thank you. Will the Secretary please call case 6C?
Hearing advertised as required by law is hereby open to consider agenda item 6C regarding case SUP 2007-70121, applicant Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Conejo Valley, request to allow church use and alternating use of parking facilities within a commercial office complex, location 3327 and 3331 Old Conejo Road. Recommendation approved with conditions.
Mr. Renke?
Chair Fisher and members of the Commission, the applicant's request is to approve the special use permit application for a church use and approval of an alternating use of parking facilities within a commercial office complex. The project location is on Old Conejo Road. The site plan shows the two buildings, 9 and 10, in the northwest corner of the office complex. A view from Old Conejo Road. The project is now under construction. The site is being developed for 31 office buildings with 572 parking spaces on a 14-acre site, zoned C, O, and C2. All of the buildings will be individually owned. The special use permit is required by the municipal code for religious facilities in the CO zone. And the church is proposing to occupy two adjacent buildings, number 9 and 10. The one-story building 9 is to be a 55-seat sanctuary. The two-story building 10 will include a fellowship hall, a 1,008 square foot multi-purpose room, 7 classrooms and 3 offices, a kitchen. There are no exterior buildings or site changes proposed. The church will utilize a shared parking program. The shared use analysis shows the church parking demand will occasionally exceed allotted supply on weekday evenings and weekends when other office buildings in the office park are typically closed. The sanctuary multi-purpose room will not be in use at the same time per condition number 10 in the staff report. The church will use less than their assigned parking during the weekdays, thereby providing additional parking for other office tenants. And then there are 572 total parking spaces in the office park. The project qualifies for a Class 1 categorical exemption pursuant to Section 15301 of the CEQA guidelines, as it involves operation of an existing private structure with no use expansion. And staff recommends the Planning Commission approve the project based on findings and conditions detailed in the staff report, and staff is available for any questions.
Questions of staff. Commissioner Reynolds.
Good evening, Mr. Reinke. You said that each of these buildings is going to be privately owned. Is the church going to own these 2 buildings?
That's correct. It's an approved condo office complex. So each of the buildings in the complex will be individually owned.
Okay, so it's really up to then the owners of some other buildings and their ownership of the parking to allow then the church to use the shared parking.
Yes, at this office complex, there's a reciprocal parking space where a program where everyone is able to use other people's parking spaces.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Len.
Good evening. As long as we're talking about parking, I don't have an issue with the shared parking analysis that's been done, but in number 10, under parking, it indicates that you cannot have the multipurpose room and the sanctuary to be used at the same time. And I'm just wondering, how are we going to police that or enforce that?
That's a normal condition at most of the churches. We don't have I believe, a specific condition addressing that, but let's see. Oh, okay. Well, let's see. In condition number 10, we do say, and all day on weekend, provided that the use of the sanctuary or multi-purpose room of the fellowship hall shall not be in use at the same time.
Maybe I can help answer that question in addition. As is typical with any type of condition that's imposed on a project, it would be enforced through our code enforcement department. It would be if there's a complaint that's received for crowded parking conditions and it's determined that they're operating both of them at the same time, an enforcement action could be brought against the church and its SUP could be revoked.
Thank you.
Commissioner Adam.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Rinke. I just had a follow-up question to Commissioner Lunds on that, on the use of the sanctuary and the multipurpose room. As I counted on the plans, there seems to be 3 multipurpose rooms, room A and B on the ground floor, and then there's another multipurpose room on the second floor. So are we saying then that all 3 of those multipurpose rooms would not be used while the sanctuary was in use? To referring to all 3 of them?
We're just saying the main multi-purpose room down on the first floor. The room that's labeled as a multi-purpose room 7 on the second floor there, that's mainly a meeting room. It won't really function as with the intensity of the main multi-purpose room.
So we're just talking about multipurpose room A and B then?
Yes, on the first floor.
On the first floor. Okay. Just wanted to get that clear. And just a question on terminology, as far as parking analysis go, for my own edification. Is the term alternating parking synonymous with shared parking?
We've used them in kind of a synonymous way. The alternating use of the facilities mainly means that they'll be operating at different times, and then the shared use that they'll be sharing the parking, because during the weekdays when the church is not in operation, the other office uses will be using their parking during the weekdays. So it's a shared use in that regards.
So the terms are somewhat interchangeable then, with a little bit of nuance.
That's correct.
All right, thank you.
Other questions? Okay. We will go ahead and open the public hearing and go to our applicant. Representing the applicant is Mr. Tom Cohen. Mr. Cohen, you have 15 minutes. Please state your name, city of residence for the record.
Thank you, Chair Fisher, Commissioners. My name is Tom Cohen. I'm a resident here of Thousand Oaks, and I'm here on behalf of the applicant, the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of the Conejo Valley, and I will be brief. Tonight we have with us on behalf of the fellowship the Reverend Dr. Betty Stapleford. She'd like to say a few words, and we have Jeff Goldstein, president of the fellowship, who would also like to share a couple of words. And we'd like to thank Ed, Ricky, and the city staff for assisting with the processing of this application. I know there's some elements to this that can be difficult to understand, but there are also concepts that have been used in many other instances throughout the city, this concept of the shared parking and alternate parking. We have reviewed all project conditions that staff has put forth for you tonight, and we have agreed to accept all conditions. And that's all we have to offer from this position. If you have any questions that you'd like to direct to me, I'd be happy to answer.
Questions? Commissioner Reynolds?
Good evening, Mr. Cohen. I was curious about the time, to 11 o'clock at night. I know that so many things around town that if you use a room at the library, you have to be out by 9. If you use any of the rooms here at City Hall, it's 10 o'clock or you pay a fee. Why do they need to have it till 11 o'clock? And the reason I ask this is because when we saw the shopping center across the street a couple of weeks ago, we did condition that they could not park or use the back of doors of any of the different businesses, not only the 24-hour fitness, to 10 o'clock. And I know this church is the furthest away and next to the freeway, but I'm concerned about those neighbors.
Sure. Thank you for your question. First, there aren't any conditions immediately that restrict our use of the buildings. That would be something that, if that was in the Commission's best interest and belief that that was necessary, then we would entertain and have a discussion about that, and I suppose that's what we're doing. My understanding with the application that was before you 2 weeks ago for the Wendy Shopping Center, there were restrictions as it applied to parking behind the building as it was immediately adjacent to that residential neighborhood. And then there are outbuildings, pad buildings, where I'm not entirely sure of all the uses, but I know that there's a restaurant with a drive-through, and they had hours of operation restrictions as well, but their hours went to midnight Monday through Thursday, and I believe Sunday, and then they had till 2 a.m. On Friday, Saturday. And I'm assuming that those conditions were acceptable because you had an intervening building to block noise. We have the same condition where we're talking about locating, where there are several intervening buildings between us and Old Conejo Road, and then you've got a street, and then you have the residence. So it would be our preference to not have any hour restrictions. There are events that come up infrequently where they serve a dinner or something else that carries past the 11:30 hour, and they would like to be able to have the opportunity to do that here at this location. So, and we feel with the noise of the freeway, certain to drown out any activities going on at the site that really will not present a problem. Now, as Ms. Noonan indicated earlier, where there are problems, certainly you have code enforcement to step in and deal with noise disturbances and those things.
I want to say thank you. Now I know why you're the attorney and I'm not. I didn't even think about those buildings in the front with the drive-through, the restaurant, even though, of course, you won't have the volume of cars that you would have if people were leaving the church buildings. But thank you for your explanation.
My pleasure.
And if I could also just point to the commission to page 102 of their packet is the actual condition imposed on the Win DeVito project, and it's 7 days a week until 11 p.m. So.
Other questions? No? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Cohen.
Thanks very much.
Okay, we'll go to our other speakers. I have 3 speaker cards. Each speaker will be given 5 minutes. First speaker, Dr. Betty Stapleford. Dr. Stapleford, if you can please state your name, city of residence for the record.
I'm the Reverend Dr. Betty Stapleford. I'm a resident of Thousand Oaks, California, and I'm delighted to be here tonight. I have been the minister of the Conejo Valley Unitarian Universalist Fellowship for the past 9 years. The congregation has been in existence since 1962, and we're affiliated with the Unitarian Universalist Association of Congregations with congregations throughout the United States. We are historically connected with the founding fathers of this country, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, John Quincy Adams, and others since those. We've been meeting in the Global Senior Center for the last 10 years, and we feel kind of like, I don't know how many of you have seen the musical Brigadoon. We rise up on Sunday mornings from 9 to 1, and that's our rental time, and then we sink back into the mist and go. We have an office here in town on Rancho Road, but basically our services have been in existence in that location as a kind of a Brigadoon type arrangement. We're looking forward to the opportunity to have a 24/7 space where we can do things in our own building rather than in people's homes and renting other spaces in the community. With those limitations on our time, we have in the last 10 years grown to a membership of 200 members with close to 100 children. We have Sunday services, religious education for children and adults, a wide variety of small group meetings, social gatherings and enrichment programs, faith in action projects to serve the larger community, and interfaith activities with other congregations and religious organizations in the Conejo Valley. We would like, our dream is to be able to serve a much larger population in this area who could benefit from our services and our programs, to expand our ability to contribute to the larger community. At this point, we serve the homeless at someone else's church. We would like to be able to have the opportunity to do those kinds of things in our own building. We would like to also provide a space for like-minded people in the community for spiritual and intellectual growth, and we hope that you will help us realize our dreams in this community. Thank you very much. I'll be glad to answer any questions that you might have.
Questions? No questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next speaker, Terry Hinriker. Sorry if I mess up your name here. Please state your name, city of residence, and you'll have 5 minutes.
My name is Terry Heinricher. I'm the chairman of the site committee that actually helped create this process. And I really was only going to have questions for you. If you had questions for me, I really didn't have any plans on speaking tonight. So, I live here in Thousand Oaks.
Questions? No questions. Thank you. Our last speaker, Jeff Goldstein.
Good evening. My name is Jeff Goldstein, and I am a resident of West Hills. And as was mentioned, I'm the current president of the congregation. I want to thank you for hearing us tonight. And as Betty mentioned earlier, we've been very proud participants in the community for 43 years. And about 4 years ago, as we've grown larger and larger, we decided we needed to find our own space and our own facility to be able to operate 24/7. And we did want to stay in this area. And we've had a very difficult search. There are very limited opportunities for our size of organization. And when we discovered this opportunity at the Bollinger Office Park, it was very serendipitous, and it meets our needs, location, and size, and the costs. So we are very hopeful that the Planning Commission will understand the value between allowing this area to be used for a church in addition to the business functions that are currently being planned. So, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? No questions. Thank you, Mr. Goldstein.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll go back to staff for follow-up.
I have no additional comments.
Any questions for staff at this point? No? Okay, we'll go back to the applicant, Mr. Cohen. Okay, Mr. Cohen has nothing to add. Thank you. Okay, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing, open for commission discussion and/or motion. Commissioner Reynolds.
Thank you. I'll start the discussion. I think this is an excellent use. I wasn't here for that hearing when the Bollinger project was approved. I was out of town, and I didn't realize that these were condominiums that would be sold, and that's why I was a little confused or asked that question. I would at this time very much like to move approval of SUP 2007-70121. I was, as you noticed, concerned about the time, but I think because of the location and of the buildings, and that there aren't any homeowners down here tonight talking about the traffic concerns or anything, so I'm very pleased to make that motion to approve.
Comments to the motion. Commissioner Adam.
Yes, just one very minor point I brought up to our staff on condition number 10. Commissioner Reynolds, should we just refine that to read the first floor multipurpose room, A and B? I'm just going by the diagram here, and there seems to be another multipurpose room on the second floor, which I guess is not to be included in that condition. So it would just simply say that the use of the sanctuary and the first floor multipurpose rooms A and B in the fellowship hall should not be in use at the same time.
I think that's fine. I'll accept that.
Okay. Any other comments to the motion? Okay, I think this is a great use for this particular property, and I think the impacts on the surrounding area is very minimal and will be a good addition to it. So with that, vote please.
Motion passed 5-0.
And there's a 10-day appeal period. Will the secretary please call case 6D?
Hearing advertised as required by law is hereby open to consider agenda item 6D regarding Municipal Code Amendment 2003-112. Applicant, City of Thousand Oaks, request an amendment to the Thousand Oaks Municipal Code to change the municipal code to establish a definition and adopt development standards for residential sports facilities and related apparatus. Location, citywide. Recommendation, recommend City Council approve MCA 2003-112.
Mr. Kearns.
Good evening, Chair Fisher, members of the Commission. If we could please go to PowerPoint. As mentioned before you this evening is MCA 2003-112, proposing to modify the municipal code to provide a definition for residential sports facilities and include general development standards for installation of these facilities. The purpose of this amendment is to provide explicit language in the municipal code that defines certain improvements that would qualify as a sports facility. This amendment would also provide development standards that apply specifically to the installation of a sports facility as an accessory use to an existing single-family residence. Since this amendment is solely a change in procedure, it does not qualify as a project as defined by CEQA and is therefore not is exempt from CEQA requirements. In 1993, the city modified the precise plan design standards include specific improvements that would require the filing of a precise plan design application. This list includes the installation of sports court and sports court lighting. On September 16th, 2003, the City Council initiated this amendment to address sports courts. This was in part due to the installation of a skateboard ramp system installed at a single-family residence. On July 18th, 2006, the City Council authorized the Residents' Roundtable to study this item. And after several meetings devoted to discussing this topic, the Residents' Roundtable concluded at its April 2nd, 2007 meeting that appropriate considerations had been made and voted to forward this item onto the Planning Commission. In review of this topic, the Roundtable first considered types of facilities that could be installed on residential property. The group determined that there are several installations that are sports courts, that are sports related but do not include courts. And since the PPD procedural requirement specifically states sports courts, the Roundtable determined that changing the requirement from sports courts to residential sports facilities would be more appropriate. That was in order to capture all sports related improvements. Therefore, the Roundtable is recommending changing the existing term in the code from sports courts to residential sports facilities. Before you is the specific language for residential sports facilities, the recommended language. After considering different types of facilities, the Roundtable established this definition for residential sports facilities. Essentially, it has two parts to it. First, it establishes what types of improvements, such as basketball courts, skateboard ramps, batting cages, would qualify as a residential sports facility. And secondly, it provides a statement that would exempt certain installations from qualifying as a sports facility. This definition would include any sports facility, whether or not it has lights, and it would exempt temporary apparatus from qualifying an area as a sports facility, such as a concrete patio in a rear yard with a portable basketball hoop on it. In considering installation standards, the Roundtable evaluated various aspects of a typical facility. First, they consider lighting that could be used, and the roundtable believes that limiting the height of a light standard to 14 feet is appropriate, and this is actually consistent with current city practice. They also believe that certain lamps should be prohibited in residential areas, such as low-pressure sodium or mercury vapor lamps. And also, in order to ensure that lighting does not spill upward or beyond property lines where the sports court is located, that any request for a sports facility shall include a photometric plan for review by the city. Secondly, the group evaluated enclosure fencing, which is typical for some installations. After considering previously approved sports court requests and their associated fencing, the roundtable believes that the existing city practice of allowing 10 feet high fencing is both adequate fencing height and an appropriate maximum for residential areas. They also believe that using certain materials such as untreated chain link should not be allowed in residential areas, and they're recommending the use of a dark colored plastic coated wire fabric. Additionally, since batting cage netting, batting cages typically have netting on all sides and the top, the enclosure system is not considered fencing, although it could be interpreted as enclosure fencing by residents. So in order to avoid confusion, the group believes that imposing a separate height standard for batting cages would be appropriate, and they're recommending a height of 14 feet. And this is actually a typical installation height for batting cages. And third, the group considered the aesthetics associated with the installation of one of these facilities. And in keeping with the city's architectural design standards, the group is recommending that earth tone hues are used. Additionally, the roundtable is recommending a notification statement that screening may be required via the PPD process. This would be in cases where it's necessary to provide an additional visual barrier from streetscapes and or neighboring properties. And fourth, the roundtable considered setbacks from property lines for sports facilities, and after reviewing this, they believe that utilizing the same setback used for accessory buildings or structures would be appropriate for sports facilities, and this setback is typically 5 feet from the rear and 5 feet from the side in residential areas. And lastly, the roundtable considered noise impacts and use of these facilities, and in order to keep noise levels associated with the facility to appropriate hours, the group is recommending limiting the use of any sports facility lighting and the facility itself to the hours of 7 a.m. and 9 p.m. 7 days a week. Additionally, the roundtable believes that any residentially installed sports facility should not be used for commercial purposes. They should only be used by the residents for private recreational purposes. So using it for providing tennis lessons or batting instruction would not be allowed with a sports court or sports facility. In summary, the proposed amendment would change the current term used by the PPD section of sports courts to residential sports facilities. It will establish an explicit definition for residential sports facilities, and it would add specific installation standards for those installations that would qualify as a residential sports facility. The benefits of this proposed amendment are the addition of language in the code that will clarify what a residential sports facility is. It will also establish clear development standards for those contemplating such an improvement on their property. Therefore, staff recommends the Planning Commission recommend approval of the attached ordinance to City Council based on the findings contained in the staff report. And this concludes staff's presentation, and staff is available for any questions you might have.
Questions for staff, Mr. Adam.
Thank you. Hello, Mr. Kearns. Well, first of all, let me thank the Residents' Roundtable again for their thoughtful analysis of this issue. It gives us a great outline to work by. And if I may, I'd like to just ask you a few questions. I think it's excellent that we're redefining a sports court into a residential sports facility because, as it mentions in the report, it catches things that weren't caught before, like batting cages and skateboard ramps and who knows what else in the future. Just if I may, a couple of questions. I know you've seen those basketball hoops that are set up in cul-de-sacs and out in streets, and they appear to be portable, but there are times when they're set there for quite a long period of time. How would they be considered in this new amendment? Would they be considered to be temporary? Would they be permanent? Would they be exempt from the code? Or
they wouldn't be addressed in this ordinance change. They are addressed by our Public Works Department, since those are typically installed in the right-of-way, and that's they're not allowed within the street. So those type of facilities would not be considered as part of this, since they're addressed currently by the code now, as it is now.
Are they not allowed in the street?
They're not allowed in the street now.
Even though they are in the street on occasion?
That may
but
be
they're
the
not
case.
supposed to be there, right?
They're not supposed to be there. Right?
Okay. All righty. And just a couple other things, if I may. Let's see. As far as the lighting, it says that we would tolerate a maximum light standard of 14 feet, and the conclusion was come by comparing it to lighting, parking lot lighting, commercial lighting. That we used 14 feet for that, so 14 feet would be reasonable for residential. Do you think that's an apt comparison to compare commercial parking lot lighting to what you'd see at a home in a residence? The height, that is?
Well, the commercial parking lot light standards, if it was just a commercial parking lot within a commercial area, is 20 feet high. This standard is actually a reduction in that height, since it would be located adjacent to a residential area. That height is probably about the minimum you can utilize for a light standard in order to provide light coverage for the sports court facility. So I do believe it's an adequate height.
Yeah, I'm just looking here in the report. It says it limits parking lot light standards adjacent to a residential property to a maximum height of 14 feet. I see. Okay, so they're saying that because parking lot lighting adjacent to a residential property would be limited to 14 feet, that it makes sense to limit residential lighting to 14 feet as well.
That's the interpretation, yes.
Does that seem high to you, 14 feet?
Well, in order to provide light coverage, we want to use like a shoebox type design, which is facing downward, as opposed to using carriage lighting or something, which could provide light pollution upward. In order to achieve that and provide adequate coverage with the least amount of light standards, then 14 feet would be just about the minimum height you can use.
Are there existing sports facilities with 14 feet high lighting now in existence?
There are some in the city with 14 feet height standards, yes.
Okay. One other question I had, as far as the times of operation for these facilities. I mean, I know by the PPD you can regulate the times on a case-by-case basis, but then it states in the Municipal Code Amendment that it would be from, generally speaking, from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. 7 days a week. And of course there'd be no commercial use and that kind of thing. We just ruled last week on some times at the operation for a pool at Cal Lutheran, and we tightened it up a little bit from what they originally had asked. And I just wonder if you don't think that that's 7 a.m. Why do we have such an early start time ability, 7 a.m., 7 days a week?
That 7 a.m. start time is actually consistent with the ordinance pertaining to construction hours. So 7 a.m. in the morning would be an allowed time or an allowance to perform any sort of construction. So we felt that the roundtable felt that was an appropriate time frame.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that 7 a.m. start date. So in other words, they based the start time on a sports facility and compared it to the start time for construction.
That's correct.
That was the rationale behind that?
Yeah.
I see. Because, of course, again, the construction is a temporary situation whereby the sports facility could be there for years, right?
That's correct. There's also, mowing your lawn, leaf blowers, that kind of thing. Those also fall within those time periods.
Are they also 7 a.m.?
They're 7 a.m. as well.
I see. Okay, well. All right. Thank you. Let me see. Oh, I had one other question about the setbacks. It says that we require setback requirements for accessory buildings. These would be viewed as accessory buildings. What are those setback requirements?
The setbacks are typically 5 feet from the rear property line and 5 feet from the side, and then a separation of 6 feet from the house. Now, these are all rear yard. We wouldn't permit them in the front yard at all. So the determination was that since that's applied for accessory buildings up to 15 feet high, it'd be appropriate to apply that standard for sports courts as long as they're oriented properly on the property.
So 5 feet, basically, then?
5 feet typically,
5 feet. Okay. All right, thank you.
Commissioner Grumney.
I'm not sure if this question is for you, Mr. Kern, or for Ms. Noonan, but in my community where I live, it seems to, when you're looking at those skateboard ramps, we have equal numbers of people who like to use those ramps for rollerblades and for bikes. Would the term that we're just specifying skateboard ramps, would that be inclusive for when someone would be maybe utilizing those for bicycles and for?
It would be the same. The definition, the way it's worded, is included but not limited to, so we have some flexibility on making an interpretation that, of what would qualify as a residential sports facility.
Okay, so just to make sure I'm totally understanding, so if somebody was planning that they put that in their backyard, but they're not going to use a skateboard, they're going to use rollerblades, and then they say, well, it's a rollerblade ramp, you know.
We would then require the PPD process. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Lynn.
Thank you, Chair Fisher. Good evening. Page 31 under E, paragraph 2, talks about home-based businesses. It's supposed to be private residential use only, and I understand clearly where the Residents' Roundtable was going with that, but that does not exclude, or hopefully it would not exclude, private lessons to be taken. In other words, private tennis lessons for your son or daughter, or that sort of thing. That was not meant to exclude that?
The purpose of that was to keep it from being associated with a home-based business. So
okay, so private.
I'm sorry?
So private use would be okay there?
Private use would be okay.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Reynolds.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Kearns. I want to talk about the noise, and my concern is because I live 7 houses away from the baseball field in the Conejo Creek Park, and whenever they're playing down there, you hear that, and I don't know if it's a bing, bing, the aluminum bats being used. Was there any consideration made, because in the examples or the exhibits that you put in our packet, it showed that they restricted one homeowner with a batting cage to put a sleeve on the aluminum bats, and I believe from just talking to my husband that it's the little leaguers or the young kids that love to use those aluminum bats because they believe the balls will go further. And I just wondered if there was any consideration, if aluminum bats are going to be used in a home batting cage, that they do have, I guess, a sleeve on them.
We didn't get into specifics of defining each sports facility and conditions that would be imposed on each sports facility. What we did do through this ordinance was provide general installation standards or restrictions. Through the PPD process, that could be a consideration, as you mentioned in that attachment that discusses the batting cage. There were hour restrictions imposed on that, days of the week that court could be used or that batting cage could be used, and that was required to use sleeves on the bats in order to suppress some of the sound associated with the cage.
So you'd rather have this ordinance as more of a general one than us nitpicking and putting this and that condition on it? Is that what you're saying?
That's correct.
Okay. I wanted to ask, and I guess because I was a tennis player and even played in my backyard growing up in Encino, and my husband was even on his college team, and I'm real concerned about a 10-foot high fence I know that there's some tennis courts in Conejo Oaks, and there are a lot of tennis balls that go over even a 14-foot high. So I'm real concerned with the 10-foot high fence for a tennis court. I'd much rather see that a 12-foot. I know that so many people with courts go and they actually screen in because of the wind and everything. I don't have a problem with the 14-foot high lights, but I'm really concerned with those balls, and especially hit by children, you know, that I think adults, well, I'm sure that they hit them out of court too. But was there any consideration of staff to look at that to being higher than the 10-foot?
We get requests quite a bit to go higher than the 10 feet. What we do in the case of tennis courts is, since those are custom installations, if they do wish to have additional fence height, they grade the court surface down about 4 feet or so and then install the fence. We measure it from the higher finished grade, so the exposed height, particularly as perceived from residential or adjacent properties, is only at 10 feet, and while the interior dimensions are more 14 or higher.
Okay, if you're having someone grade down 4 feet, then they then have to put a retaining wall in, I would assume, which would require a permit. Would a 2-foot wall require a permit?
A 2-foot wall, if it had any sort of surcharge, I mean, being adjacent to a slope or something, it would require a permit. If it was just flat, level ground behind it, it would not require a building permit.
I'd much rather see graded down 2 feet than 4 feet. That, as I said, I'm just really think that 10 feet is not high enough. I know I had an Irish setter that scaled a 9-foot chain link fence at a boarding facility one time, so and also the hours. I'm sure that there'll be some discussion with us on it after the discussion we had the community pool. I'd much rather see the 8 a.m. to 9 on the hours. Living next door or having a batting cage up and back, that wasn't as noisy as the diving board from the swimming pool, but there were kids next door to us that loved to play basketball, and he eventually got a 4-year scholarship. But having a court next to you is a little different than sitting here and talking about journal things. And I live in an area that does have larger property, so you can have room for a tennis court or a sports facility on the properties. Well, thank you.
Commissioner Adam.
I'm sorry, just one other quick question. It's kind of a follow-up to Commissioner Reynolds. Some of these activities are more intrusive than others, you might say. Batting cages, for example, might be considered to be more intrusive than a volleyball court, perhaps, noise-wise, participation-wise, etc. So you're confident then that we don't need a specific set of restrictions on certain activities, that the PPD process can pick that up, and it's adequate to go with more of this general frame outline then?
Yeah, through the PPD process, we can evaluate the request on a case-by-case basis, of course. The PPD is not something that's just a matter of right, and we approve it because it meets certain development standards. These standards are all maximums that are going to be imposed, and if it's more appropriate to enforce or impose conditions that are more restrictive, we'll do so through that process. But in the case, say, for example, if a batting cage comes in requested in the middle of a 5-acre lot, of course it's not going to have the same standards imposed on it as a more highly dense residential area.
All right. That's good. Thank you.
Mr. Kern, one question. Following that train of thought with, let's say somebody wants to put in a batting cage, as part of the PPD process, are neighbors contacted in that?
Yeah, that's really one of the main intents of this PPD process, is to provide notification to neighbors. All residences within 150 feet of the property would be advised of the request.
Great, thank you. Other questions? No other questions of staff? Okay, I do not have any public speaker cards on this particular item, so take it back to the commission for a recommendation. Commissioner Adam?
Yeah, I'm very receptive to this amendment. I believe that we do need to update our definition of what a sports court is and rephrase it as a residential sports facility. It gives the city a little bit more power and regulation of some more current uses, such as batting cages and things that have come up since it was written back in '93. And Commissioner Reynolds mentioned this, however. I would move to approve this, but I would like to change those hours. And I understand that's a general time frame, and it can be corrected through the PPD process, but I just feel that 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. 7 days a week is a little too much, and I'm not sure if I buy that comparison, because that's when construction starts. My inclination, and I would be happy to hear from my fellow commissioners, would be to move that from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m., 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., and in deference to the next door neighbors that may have to endure a batting cage or a tennis court or whatever. And again, I acknowledge that the PPD process can hone that down even further, but generally speaking, I think we should need to tighten those hours up, and my inclination would be from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. So I guess with that, I could move that we do approve the Municipal Code Amendment MCA 2003-1112, but I would suggest that I would move that we change the hours of operation from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. to 9 a.m. to 9 p.m.
Okay, and this is a recommendation to the city council, not approval.
This is exactly right. We would be recommending to the city that they adopt this code.
Commissioner Lund.
Thank you, Commissioner Fisher. I won't support that that motion. I want to discuss the hours in general. I want to thank, first of all, the Residents Roundtable for the fine work and city staff for putting this report together. They've done a yeoman's effort here. They did a very, very fine job. But I want us to slow down just a little bit when we start talking about hours of operations and then automatically assuming that we are going to compare these residential projects to commercial projects that this commission has heard before. While there are some similarities, there's some huge differences, and it's philosophical in nature. We've got I know we have 3 attachments to this staff report, but remember, we're talking about a residential sports facility. This talks about a residence. This talks about personal property and personal property rights. And I think that we need to step very careful on this precipice so we don't go down the slippery slope and start legislating from this dais, from this city, what kind of city are we, as to what we do in our own backyards. If we start legislating what we do for hours of operations in our backyard, where does it stop? Where's the next one that comes in front of us? Does that mean that somebody swimming in a swimming pool can't swim? We're going to regulate what times they can swim, or how about the next person that wants to do a barbecue in their backyard? And we're going to start telling them what time they want to do barbecues. I think we've got to be very, very careful as a policy when we start to codify things, when we start talking about personal property rights, and is what do we want to attach for hours of operation? First of all, most of these sports courts, as been brought up by my esteemed colleagues, have to be put on pieces of property that are larger than the normal residential lot. And I think when you start talking about hours of operation, now we run into the element of enforcement. And where does enforcement come from? It comes from code enforcement. It comes from the police. We have rules, we have laws that are enforced by the police that talk about noise, that they're on the books right now. And I think it's, just from my personal opinion, that I think we've got to be very careful about what we do here in terms of saying what can be done on your own personal property in your backyard. It takes away the good neighbor. What's wrong with your neighbor coming to you and say, hey, you're making too much noise? What's wrong with the parent saying, hey, kids, you're in the backyard, you're making too much noise? I think there's a great idea to define and to codify a residential sports facility. I think for all the good reasons, where I think I have problems with, and hopefully you understand, is if I have problems with the hours, because I don't think it's right for government to say that I can't I cannot play quietly on my sports court that's had a photometric engineering report to be done, or I can't hit a ball at 6 o'clock in the morning if all the noise restrictions are placed on a bat, or hitting tennis balls because I have to go to work and the only time that I can do it is in the early morning. I'm opposed to the hours in terms of the general ordinance as you described this to be, because it deals with personal property rights use in the backyard, and I draw a definite distinction between this and commercial properties. So I stir the pot with that and encourage discussion.
Commissioner Adam.
Well, I think as far as this, the commercial property analogy was used by staff to set that 7 a.m. time, because they said that, well, since construction can start at 7 a.m., as we've heard many, many times, we'll let sports courts activity start at 7 a.m. But based on your argument, then, Commissioner Lund, are you suggesting that there would be no times at all, then?
No, we have noise ordinances on the books. When you make too much noise, you either hear from your neighbor, you hear from code enforcement, or you hear from the police. And my recommendation is that I just from a personal standpoint, I become very skittish when I'm talking about abdicating my personal property rights about what I can do in my backyard and what time if I've complied with all the regulations that the city has placed upon me. I think it's a very dangerous thing that we go down. I'm not suggesting that there not be hours. I'm suggesting that every case should be evaluated. But I got to tell you, when you come in off the city easement and come onto your personal property, you're walking straight in the middle of the Constitution of this United States. And I have serious issues with us telling people what they can do in their own property as long as it's legally, morally correct. I don't know. I have issues with this. Yes.
Well, if you know, in these attachments that we received, the PPDs evaluated different situations. Like there's one here for a batting cage, and they limited the hours quite precipitously. They said that no more than 10 hours in a week, no more than 2 hours in any day. The batting cage shall not be used Fridays or Sundays. The batting cage may only be used between hours of 2:30 p.m. and 7 p.m. Mondays through Thursdays, between the hours of 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. on Saturdays. I mean, that's the city of Thousand Oaks talking to the homeowner. I think what we're talking about here is not the PPD process. We're talking about just this general overall municipal code that gives a general amount of hours. And so are you saying that you want to stick to the 7 a.m. to 9 p.m., or you just don't want to have any hours restrictions at all?
I'm going to say two things. I don't want any restrictions at all, to answer your recent question, and I am familiar with the three examples that have been previously done. And with all due respect to my previous colleagues, I wasn't there then, and I didn't review that, so I don't know why they came to those conclusions. In general, by looking at it as a spectator looking in, I don't like them. We're talking about personal property rights use. So I'm saying no, not from a general ordinance here. I don't want any hours.
Okay, well.
Want to continue with some other commission discussion? I'm sure there's some more out here.
Yeah.
Commissioner Grumney?
Commissioner Lund, just so I can kind of explore yours a little bit more, what ultimately you might be suggesting is that is not that there wouldn't be an incident where you would need to have hours, but allow that to go through the process where then it would come back and it would be part of an application that they would have, and then you could, if it turned out to be because of the proximity of the neighbors or something, therefore, that would be where a time restriction would be. Did I understand you correctly?
As usual, Commissioner Grumney very eloquently said. That's exactly, you're right on point. I think that it should be allowed to go through the process with all the stipulation and all the scrutiny of the process, and on an individual basis, evaluate if the project is good for all the people. And that's the reason that I'm making this comment.
Commissioner Grumney?
Just to follow up, I have to tell you, Commissioner Lund, you made a very good argument, and I would concur with you. And I would support this with taking limitations out and allowing that to be decided at the time of application.
Commissioner Reynolds?
And I'd like to change the subject. I want to talk about the height of the fence for tennis courts, or for sports facilities, excuse me, that I really see, well, I think that 10 feet is just not high enough for a sports facility, that it should, I would love to say 14, but I'm going to compromise on it and say 12 feet, that I really think that that's more suitable, especially if it's going to be a tennis court in a backyard. And so I would, if Commissioner Adam has a motion on the floor, and I don't know if he'll accept that as a friendly, or I will make a motion for amendment to his motion. I don't.
Okay, I guess.
Well, I want to see if Commissioner Adam would change his motion and accept that the fences be 12 feet high, or if he doesn't, then I will make an amendment.
Okay, let me weigh in here on my comments, because we have a couple different directions that I think we're going. With the sports court or sports facilities, I think this is a good thing for the city. Putting hours of operation, my initial thought was that, you know, this came from the residents roundtable, and, you know, this the residents that are providing input. But then Commissioner Lund had a very good argument with property rights and you know, knowing your neighbor, and if you have a problem, you talk to your neighbor, and we do have avenues in place that we can go through. And from what I've seen being on the commission and watching staff, how they plan things, how they react to complaints, I'm certainly very comfortable with personally leaving the hours of operation out of it. And I don't think this is something that we can put a cookie cutter type thing to. You know, as was mentioned before, we have different size lots, different uses that want to be explored for the property, and the residents around the area of the PPD will be notified and have input into it, and, you know, they may end up with hours of operation. And I think the city staff can handle that. I don't think we need to put a cookie cutter type approach to this one. With regards to the fences, whether you have a 14-foot or a 30-foot fence, you're going to have tennis balls flying over. So, you know, I think it is a good standard, and I guess I'd rather have tennis balls flying over than baseballs or golf balls or something like that that can do some damage. So I'm not really concerned with that. So those are my comments, and I'll turn it back open for continued commission discussion. Commissioner Reynolds.
I also wanted to mention that I think in so many of the areas where the properties are large, that there's probably a property owners association, and even though we do not enforce CC&Rs, or the city does not, I'm sure that the property owners associations, when they approve these sports facilities on properties, would probably have hours, regulate the hours, and so the city might not even be involved, because I know the CC&Rs are something that the property owners association can enforce the hours right there. They can't go and, let's say, if the city goes and says you can't use you can only use it starting at 9 a.m. in the morning, the property owners association can't say you can start using it at 8 in the morning, but the property owners association could say you can't use it till 10 o'clock, and the people would have to adhere to that. So I'm I'm very supportive of Commissioner Lund's statement in leaving the hours of operation open.
Commissioner Adam.
On the hours of operation, but if we exclude general hours, as it states here, 7 a.m. to 9 p.m., just go back to the 7 a.m., which is the roundtable's recommendation, and the staff concurs with that. If we exclude that, are we ultimately going to be even more regulative? Isn't that going to put almost every project through the PPD process and through an hour's scrutiny? I mean, if we had general hours from either 7 a.m. to 9, 8 a.m. to 9, 9 a.m. to 9, it could just stop there. But if we don't include any hour restrictions at all, then to me that means it's going to be an automatic PPD and the hours will be scrutinized even further.
Commissioner Grumney.
Commissioner Adam, yeah, I'd like to respond to that. And you're absolutely right. And I think that's a good thing. Ultimately, I think that puts us in the best position to be able to do the right thing on a case-by-case basis. I concur with Commissioner Lund's point of view that if it happens to be a property that is not going to bother anyone, why can't they play tennis at 1 o'clock in the morning if it's not going to bother anybody? Likewise, there could be a situation where you're putting something in where really they shouldn't be utilizing the facilities, from 9 to 6, let's just say, hypothetically. But that puts the control back in where it should be, where it can be looked at, and I think the best decision possible could be made.
Commissioner Lund?
Yes, I think that along with Commissioner Grumney's comments, you're absolutely correct. It will provide the scrutiny and the oversight, and it will allow this process to work that all of our forefathers here in the city have established. It'll allow the process to take place. We are at best on this dais when we're making decisions, when we have input from our citizens. And so, yes, I think the answer to your question, you're absolutely correct. It will cause that scrutiny, and we'll have better decisions made by that scrutiny.
Commissioner Reynolds.
I think that this is a time now that we've had so much discussion, we need to refine or change the motion or get on to our business.
I'll go back to the maker of the motion, Commissioner Adam. Would you like to vote on your motion, withdraw it, or modify it?
We make amendments.
I think that the situation where you're going to, it's been portrayed here, where you have a 5-acre home and you're hundreds of yards from your neighbor and you could play tennis at 1 o'clock in the morning, would be very far and few between in the city. Most of the situations are we live in tract homes and houses are close together, and I think that these sports facilities have a potential to certainly impact your neighbor. I mean, we're not living in the Wild West anymore. We're all jammed in here in Thousand Oaks, and we have to be cognizant of who we live next to. And I think that the staff and the roundtable are just recommending a general hours of usage that to me is very reasonable. So I'll tell you what I will do. I'll remake my motion to go with the 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. And let's see now, as far as the tennis walls, you wanted to go from 10 feet to 12, right? What about the business of recessing the court in that would create that extra 2 feet? That wouldn't be relevant then? So if they did that, then they actually have 14 feet.
Commissioner Reynolds?
Not really, because I think they were talking about that. I guess if they did recess it, then they could even get a 14-foot high.
Right. See,
but instead of making someone cut their property down 4 feet and removing that earth, I would much rather force them maybe only to grade down 2 feet. if they wanted a 14-foot high. I'm concerned about grading it down 4 feet. We're always talking about removal of earth from properties and trucking it out, and that's truck trips through a residential neighborhood. That I would much rather just have them go down 2 feet if they wanted a 14-foot high fence, which I think basically tennis courts usually do have a 14-foot high.
Well, I think the example in the report used a 10-foot high fence, and they were talking about dropping the surface of the court 2 feet, so would net, like a tennis net, would give you 12 feet, which would get that 12 feet that you're looking for. So I guess I would, as far as that goes, I would just have my motion stay with the 10-foot fence height on the tennis court. So that would be my motion then. So basically we're approving it as written, that we recommend to the City Council they approve MCA 2003-112 as presented.
The commission would have an option then, or two options. You could go ahead and vote on that motion, or someone could make a formal motion to modify the conditions regarding the hours of operation and vote on that motion to amend that part of the ordinance and then move from there. So those are your two options.
Okay. Let's go ahead and vote on Commissioner Adams' motion to recommend to the City Council that they adopt the Residents' Roundtable and what the city staff has put together. Vote, please.
Motion failed, 4-1. Adam opposed. Adam was a yes vote.
Open it back up for another motion. Commissioner Lund.
Yes, I move to recommend to the City Council to approve Municipal Code Amendment MCA 2003-112 with the exception of the hours of operation and deleting the hours of operation. And standby one.
I'm asking Commissioner Lund for clarification. His motion is to approve the ordinance or recommend approval of the ordinance with the exception of, I guess it's paragraph 5 in the ordinance on the hours of operation. So my question is, does that also include omitting or deleting the paragraph regarding the hours on the use of the lighting?
Where is that you're referring to?
It's on page 35 of the Planning Commission packet. It basically shows you the ordinance in underlined text. That's all of the new language that staff is recommending. You'll see that paragraph 2 little i's pertain to hours on the use of lighting, and then paragraph 5 refer to hours of operation.
Thank you.
Commissioner Lund?
That would apply. My motion would apply to both sections. The elimination of the time requirements.
Comments to the motion? Commissioner Reynolds?
And would you consider a friendly amendment to changing on page 35, section 2, to be no higher than 12 feet as measured from the higher adjacent finished grade?
I would.
Additional comments? I will support the motion. Again, the Residents' Roundtable did a great job on putting this all together. Going back on the hours of operation, we've got a great city staff here that can evaluate each plan independently with the neighbors' input, and I think we're going to come out ahead of the game on that. No other questions? Vote, please.
Motion passed 4-0. Adam opposed.
Go to item number 8, Community Development Director Reports and Referrals.
Thank you, Chair Fisher. A couple of items this evening. Looking ahead on the tentative agenda, the Commission has 2 cases planned for July 9th and 4 cases planned for July 23rd. And then as well, I wanted to mention that the capital improvement program, which you approved in terms of consistency with the city's general plan, on May 14th of this year was approved by the City Council on June 12th. And that's all I had at this time.
Item number 9, minutes of June 11th, 2007. Oh, let's go back to Mr. Town.
Thank you, Chair Fisher. If I could interject here briefly, I would like to correct the minutes with regard to condition number 36, and I'm referring to page 57 of your packet. The one that relates to the public address system control measures. The way that it is worded now, if you'll note in the first sentence, it says that the use of public address system speakers and other amplified sound devices shall be prohibited between the hours of 10 and 8 a.m. on weekdays and between the hours of 10 p.m. and 9 a.m. on Saturday and Sunday, Sunday period. That should actually read that the PA system and other amplified sound devices should be prohibited between the hours of 10 p.m. and 9 a.m. every day of the week. Staff has reviewed the tape and would like to propose that correction. That would correct that condition, as well as the related condition on page 81 of your packet relative to the resolution for this major mod to the SUP, and this was for the California Lutheran University pool, and so I'd like to mention that. Secondly and finally, just another brief correction in terms of one of the letters that was distributed to you this evening in your supplemental packet. I mentioned this at the beginning of the hearing, or beginning of the meeting, I'm sorry. The second paragraph of that, this is a minor cleanup item, but it had referenced the Wendy Vito project, where we addressed the motion by Commissioner Adam relative to the CLU project. The preface to that should, of course, reference the CLU project, and that's SUP 2007-70082, same page 55 of your packet to correct. And that, as I mentioned earlier, is a non-substantive change, but I would like to bring that to the Commission's attention as well. Thank you.
Okay, a motion for the revised minutes of June 11th, 2007. Commissioner Lund.
Move to approve the meeting minutes of June 11th, 2007 with the additions and amendments as noted by Mr. Town.
Vote, please.
Motion passed 5-0.
Item number 10, AB 1234 reports. No reports. Item 11, Commission comments. No comments. I'd like to adjourn in memory of Michael Chop, Jr., his parents, Mike and Mary, and brother Steve Chop, all are long-term residents in this area. I actually played football with Steve through the high school years. Michael Chop, Jr. Died in a car accident last week back east. Very tragic accident, and I'd like to express my sympathies to the Chop family and adjourn this meeting in memory of Michael Chop, Jr. We'll go ahead and adjourn to 6:30 p.m., July 9th, 2007.